If you wake up between 3 and 5 do these three things. Bible wisdom. You often find yourself mysteriously awake between 3 a.m. and 5. What if I told you that your sleep problem isn't a problem at all, but actually a divine appointment that could transform your life? Have you noticed how the world feels different during these quiet hours? There's a sacred stillness, a special atmosphere that ancient spiritual wisdom has recognized for thousands of years. What you're experiencing might be more significant than you've ever imagined. You see, I've spent years studying biblical texts and counseling hundreds of people who share this exact experience. And here's what's fascinating. These early morning awakenings often happen to specific individuals chosen for a divine purpose. Could you be one of them? In this video, I'll reveal 3 powerful biblical practices that can transform these mysterious wake-up calls into life-changing encounters with God. These aren't just ordinary spiritual practices. They're specific actions that align perfectly with what Scripture tells us about the sacred fourth watch of the night. What makes this message particularly special is that it combines ancient biblical wisdom with practical, actionable steps you can take immediately. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand why God might be waking you during these hours, but you'll also have a clear step-by-step approach to maximize these precious moments for spiritual growth, divine guidance, and breakthrough in your life. This isn't just another spiritual video. It's a divine appointment that could mark the beginning of a new chapter in your walk with God. If you've ever experienced these early morning awakenings, type chosen in the comments below. Let's confirm together if you're being called for such a time as this. Remember, what seems like interrupted sleep might actually be an invitation to something extraordinary. Are you ready to discover what God has in store for you? If you regularly wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., drop a 7 in the comments right now. Let's see how many of God's chosen ones are gathering here today. Part 1. Understanding the spiritual significance. Have you ever wondered why certain hours of the night feel different, more sacred, more charged with spiritual energy? What if I told you that the time between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. holds a significance so profound that it has been documented throughout biblical history? And what if these aren't just ancient stories, but a pattern that continues to manifest in the lives of God's chosen people today? Let me take you back to one of the most dramatic encounters in biblical history, the night that forever changed Jacob's life. Picture this. It's the darkest part of the night, just before dawn. Jacob, a man wrestling with his past and uncertain about his future, finds himself alone by the Jabbok River. The silence is profound, broken only by the gentle flow of water. It's during these precise hours, what we now know as the fourth watch, that something extraordinary happens. Genesis 32:24-28 tells us, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak." This wasn't just any wrestling match. It was a divine encounter that would transform not only Jacob's life, but the destiny of an entire nation. As the stars witnessed this supernatural struggle, Jacob refused to let go until he received a blessing. By dawn, he wasn't just Jacob anymore. He had become Israel, a prince with God. But this isn't an isolated incident. Throughout Scripture, we see this pattern repeatedly. Consider the disciples in Mark 6:48. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. Notice the timing. It wasn't random. Jesus chose this specific watch of the night to demonstrate his power over natural laws and his commitment to reach his beloved ones in their moment of struggle. These hours, known as the fourth watch in Roman timekeeping, held special significance in ancient cultures. The Romans divided the night into 4 watches, with the fourth watch being the final stretch before dawn, typically from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. This period was considered crucial for military vigilance, as it was often when enemy forces would attempt surprise attacks. In the spiritual realm, this timing carries even deeper significance. The early Christian church understood this profound truth. They recognized these hours as a time when the veil between the natural and supernatural realms grows thinner. It's during these hours that countless testimonies throughout church history speak of divine visitations, supernatural encounters, and life-altering revelations. Think about it. Why would God choose these specific hours? The answer lies in both practical and spiritual wisdom. Physically, our bodies are in their deepest rest. Our minds are least distracted by the noise of daily life. Spiritually, the atmosphere is charged with divine potential. The Hebrew sages taught that during these hours, the river of delights mentioned in Psalm 36, 8 flows most freely. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. This pattern continues today. Countless believers worldwide report experiencing unusual awakenings during these exact hours. They describe a sense of divine presence, an unexplainable peace, or an urgent need to pray. These aren't coincidences. They're divine appointments. Let me share a modern testimony that parallels Jacob's experience. Sarah, a business executive in New York, found herself inexplicably waking at 3:15 every morning for weeks. Initially frustrated, she began to understand these awakenings as divine invitations. Like Jacob, she chose to engage with God during these hours. The result? Breakthrough solutions to long-standing problems, divine guidance for crucial decisions, and a deeper spiritual walk that transformed not only her life, but impacted her entire company. The significance of the fourth watch isn't just about timing. It's about divine strategy. Just as military commanders understand the strategic importance of the pre-dawn hours, God often chooses this time to position his people for victory, reveal his plans, and prepare them for the battles ahead. Now that we understand why these hours are so significant, let me share with you the 3 powerful practices that can transform your early morning awakenings into divine encounters that could change the course of your life forever. This sacred window of time isn't just a historical footnote. It's an invitation to experience God's presence in a unique and powerful way. The question isn't whether God is moving during these hours. The question is, are we ready to respond when he calls? Part 2. The 3 divine instructions. Have you ever wondered why certain prayers seem more powerful during these early morning hours? What makes this time so special that even Jesus himself chose it for his most intimate conversations with the Father? And why do so many spiritual breakthroughs happen specifically during the fourth watch? Let me share a remarkable story from the Gospel of Mark that illuminates the power of these divine instructions. Picture this. It's the fourth watch of the night on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples are struggling against a fierce storm, their small boat tossed by violent waves. They've been battling these waters for hours, their strength nearly depleted. The darkness seems impenetrable, and fear grips their hearts. But it's precisely during this fourth watch, between 3 am and 5 am, that Jesus chooses to appear, walking on the water. This wasn't a random timing. It was a divine appointment that demonstrates the first crucial instruction for these sacred hours. Engaging in spiritual warfare prayer. 1. Engage in spiritual warfare prayer. During these hours, the veil between the spiritual and physical realms grows thin. Just as Jesus approached his disciples during their greatest struggle, this is the time when our prayers can pierce through spiritual opposition with extraordinary power. The prophet Isaiah writes, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." Isaiah 40:29. Consider the story of Joshua before the walls of Jericho. It was during the early morning watch that he received divine strategy for victory. This same principle applies to us today. During these hours, our prayers become spiritual weapons that can break through long-standing barriers, dismantle enemy strongholds, establish divine protection over our loved ones, cancel negative assignments against our destiny. 2. Enter divine fellowship. But there's more to these hours than spiritual warfare. Remember young Samuel in the temple? It was during these quiet hours that he first heard God's voice. The scripture tells us that the Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel, Samuel. 1 Samuel 3:10. This leads us to our second divine instruction, creating sacred silence for divine fellowship. In these pre-dawn hours, when the world sleeps and distractions fade, God often speaks his clearest messages. This is when divine downloads occur. Spiritual insights are revealed. Life-changing directions are given. Prophetic dreams are understood. 3. Make prophetic declarations. The third instruction builds upon the first two and draws from an extraordinary biblical principle. Remember Job 38:12-13, where God asks, "Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place?" This reveals our spiritual authority to make declarations that shape our day. Think of Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones. God didn't just show him the problem. He commanded Ezekiel to speak life into what appeared dead. Similarly, during these fourth watch hours, your words carry special authority to command your morning, declare God's promises over your situation, release angels on assignment, establish divine order for your day. These three divine instructions work together in a powerful symphony. They follow the pattern we see in Daniel's life. He prayed with warfare authority. Spiritual warfare received divine understanding, fellowship, and declared the revealed mysteries, prophetic declaration. Let me share a modern testimony that brings this all together. Sarah, a business executive in Chicago, began practicing these three instructions during her 3 a.m. wakings. Within months, she received supernatural solutions to business challenges that had plagued her company for years. More importantly, she experienced a depth in her spiritual life she had never known before. Now that you understand these three divine instructions, you might be wondering how to practically implement them in your life. Let me show you exactly how to create a sustainable routine that will transform these early morning appointments into life-changing encounters. What makes these instructions particularly powerful is their biblical foundation combined with their practical application for modern life. They're not just ancient practices. They're living keys to unlocking divine possibilities in your daily walk with God. Remember, when God wakes you during these hours, it's not an interruption, it's an invitation. An invitation to engage in warfare prayer that breaks chains, to enter divine fellowship that transforms lives, and to make declarations that shape reality. Part 3. Practical application, success keys. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to receive clear divine guidance while others struggle to hear God's voice? What if I told you that the secret lies not just in when you wake up, but in how you steward those precious moments between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. and 5 a.m.? And what if I shared with you the remarkable story of a modern-day Daniel who discovered these ancient biblical principles? Let me tell you about James, a successful business executive from Manhattan who found himself inexplicably waking up at 3:17 a.m. every morning for months. Like many of you, he initially dismissed it as stress or his demanding schedule. But something about the consistency of these wakings stirred his spirit. This reminds me of the profound story in 1 Kings 19, where Elijah encountered God not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a gentle whisper. Similarly, James learned that God often speaks in these quiet moments when the world is still and our spirits are most receptive. One particularly challenging night, instead of fighting to go back to sleep, James decided to follow the biblical pattern of the fourth watch. He remembered how Jesus himself would rise very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Mark 1:35, to commune with the Father. This decision would transform his life forever. James developed what I call the Sacred Hour Protocol, a systematic approach to maximizing these divine appointments. First, he created a dedicated prayer journal, keeping it by his bedside, along with a soft light lamp. When awakened, he would gently transition into consciousness by taking 3 deep breaths, acknowledging God's presence without rushing. But here's where the story takes an extraordinary turn. On the 21st day of this practice, reminiscent of Daniel's 3-week period of spiritual dedication, Daniel 10:2-14, James received crystal clear guidance about a major business decision he had been wrestling with for months. The solution came not in a dramatic vision, but through a gentle impression while he sat in peaceful meditation. The key to James's success wasn't just in waking up, it was in how he structured these sacred moments. He developed 4 essential practices that anyone can implement. 1. The preparation protocol. Setting up a dedicated sacred space. Maintaining a consistent journal. Preparing your heart before sleep. 2. The awakening response. Gentle transition techniques. Specific breathing patterns. Initial prayers of acknowledgement. 3. The divine dialogue framework. Structured meditation periods. Scripture-based contemplation. Active listening exercises. 4. The documentation method. Systematic journaling. Pattern recognition. Confirmation practices. What makes this approach particularly powerful is its alignment with biblical patterns. Remember how Samuel learned to respond to God's voice under Eli's guidance. It wasn't immediate. It required practice, patience, and proper preparation. James discovered that maintaining this practice required both spiritual discipline and practical wisdom. He learned to adjust his evening routine, ensuring he was in bed by 9:30 p.m. to honor these early morning appointments. He also found that certain foods and activities in the evening could either enhance or diminish his spiritual sensitivity during these hours. The results were extraordinary. Not only did James experience unprecedented clarity in his decision-making, but his entire life began to shift. His relationships improved, his business flourished, and most importantly, his connection with God deepened in ways he never thought possible. But here's what's truly remarkable. This wasn't just a one-time experience. Over the past 5 years, I've witnessed hundreds of people implement these same principles with similar results. Like the biblical pattern where God consistently met with his people during the 4th watch, these principles work because they align with divine timing and eternal wisdom. Now that we understand how to practically apply these principles, let me share with you some extraordinary testimonies of lives transformed through this sacred practice. But first, let me ask you this. Are you ready to move from merely experiencing these wake-up calls to actually maximizing them for divine purpose? Remember, just as God had specific instructions for building the tabernacle, he has specific instructions for how we should approach these sacred morning hours. The question isn't whether he's calling you, it's whether you're prepared to respond with the right protocol when he does. Part 4. Testimonies of Promises. Have you ever wondered what truly happens when you answer God's call during these sacred hours? What transformations await those who faithfully respond to these divine appointments? Let me share with you an extraordinary testimony that will illuminate the profound impact of embracing the 4th watch. Consider the story of Sarah Mitchell, a successful corporate executive from Chicago who found herself inexplicably waking at 3:15 a.m. every morning for months. Like many of us, she initially dismissed these awakenings as stress-induced insomnia. Her world, however, was about to change dramatically through what she would later call her divine appointment. Sarah's story parallels the biblical account of Samuel, who also experienced mysterious nighttime callings. Just as Samuel initially misunderstood God's voice, Sarah too struggled to recognize the divine nature of her early morning awakenings. But one particular morning in December 2019 marked the beginning of her transformation. That morning, instead of fighting to return to sleep, Sarah remembered the teachings about the 4th watch. In the stillness of her bedroom, with the city still shrouded in darkness, she decided to embrace this moment. It felt different, she recalls, like the air itself was charged with presence. She began to pray, not with rehearsed words, but with an open heart. What happened next would fundamentally alter the course of her life. During her prayer, Sarah received a clear vision about her company's imminent financial crisis, one that hadn't yet manifested in the physical realm. The vision was specific. She saw critical flaws in their upcoming merger that would have devastated thousands of employees. This experience mirrors the biblical pattern we see in Daniel 2:19, where the prophet received crucial revelations during the night watches. Just as Daniel's midnight revelation saved lives, Sarah's obedience to God's calling prevented a corporate catastrophe that would have affected countless families. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next 3 months, Sarah's consistent fourth watch appointments became a wellspring of divine guidance. She documented every revelation, prayer, and spiritual impression in her journal. The results were astounding: strategic business decisions that seemed to have supernatural wisdom, restored relationships with estranged family members, and an inexplicable peace that permeated every aspect of her life. Perhaps most remarkably, Sarah's influence began to extend beyond her personal sphere. Colleagues noticed the change in her leadership style. Her decisions became more intuitive, yet somehow more precise. When asked about her transformed approach, she would simply smile and mention her early morning meetings with the best consultant. This testimony reflects the biblical promise found in Isaiah 54. He awakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen like one being instructed. Sarah's experience demonstrates that these divine appointments aren't just ancient biblical accounts. They're a present-day reality available to those who respond to God's call. But what makes Sarah's story particularly significant is how it illustrates the 3 key elements we discussed earlier: the power of spiritual warfare prayer, divine fellowship, and prophetic declarations. Her testimony shows us that when these elements align with God's timing during the fourth watch, extraordinary breakthrough follows. Consider this: if God is awakening you during these hours, could He be preparing you for a similar transformation? The biblical pattern shows us that divine visitations often precede significant breakthrough and transformation. Just as Jacob's wrestling match with God at Peniel marked a turning point in his destiny, your fourth watch encounters might be the precursor to your own divine breakthrough. As we prepare to conclude our time together, let me guide you through a powerful prayer that will help you steward these sacred moments effectively. But first, if Sarah's story resonates with your own experiences, I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. The power of testimonies like Sarah's lies, not just in their inspiration, but in their confirmation that God continues to work in extraordinary ways through ordinary people who simply say yes to His call. When we understand this, those early morning awakening moments transform from interruptions into invitations, divine appointments that could change not just our lives, but the lives of countless others through us. Conclusion: as we come to the close of our time together, let me share something profound with you. These early morning hours, what we've discovered isn't just about interrupted sleep or random coincidence. What we've uncovered together is a divine pattern, a sacred invitation that has been extended through the ages to those whom God chooses to entrust with His purposes. Remember the 3 key practices we discussed: engaging in spiritual warfare prayer, entering into divine fellowship, and making prophetic declarations. These aren't just religious activities. They're powerful tools that can transform these pre-dawn moments into life-changing encounters with God. But here's what's crucial to understand. The power isn't in the practices themselves, but in your faithful response to God's calling. Think about this for a moment. What if your sleep problem isn't a problem at all? What if those 3 wakings are actually sacred appointments with the divine? The choice now lies before you. Will you continue to see these moments as interruptions, or will you recognize them as interruptions, or will you recognize them as invitations? I challenge you today. The next time you find yourself awake during these hours, instead of reaching for your phone or tossing restlessly in bed, try implementing what you've learned. Take that first step of faith. Your obedience might not just change your life, it could impact generations to come. If this message has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story. Have you experienced these early morning wakings? What happened when you responded to them? Share your experiences in the comments below. Type awake if you're committed to treating your next 3 a.m. waking as a divine appointment. And here's something powerful to consider. If you're watching this video right now, it's not by chance. Perhaps God has orchestrated this very moment to prepare you for your next divine encounter. Are you ready to say yes to His invitation? Before we part, let me pray with you. Insert short, powerful prayer. If this message has blessed you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might be struggling with early morning wakings. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of believers who are learning to discern God's voice in these sacred hours. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos about deepening your spiritual walk. Remember, your next 3 a.m. waking isn't an interruption. It's an invitation. The question is, will you answer? Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, may you be blessed with the wisdom to recognize and the courage to respond to God's divine appointments in your life. Remember to drop a haw in the comments if this message has touched your heart, and let me know what topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. Together, let's grow in understanding God's ways and His perfect timing.